Okay, right, I've taken a sip of water, so let's begin. Welcome everyone to the first In Plain English Writers Workshop. Thank you everyone for being here. It's great to have you with us, and for those of you watching from the future, it's great to have you with us as well. Before beginning, I'd just like to thank everyone at the In Plain English team for helping to plan, prepare, and organise this event. So without them, it would not have been possible. So Shamadri, Saham, and Leela, thank you for everything. I'm sure the crowd and all the everyone is happy as well. So anyway, if you haven't heard of In Plain English, we are a tech-focused media company that was founded in 2018, and our goal is to empower people with accessible educational media. So we're home to some of the world's most recognizable tech publications, such as JavaScript in plain English and Python in plain English. And we have more than 5,000 writers and over 25,000 articles across our publications. And collectively, our publications receive over 2.5 million views every month. Now, onto this workshop, as you can see, the workshop, our first workshop is titled 4 Steps to Improve the Quality of Your Writing. And our goal today is to empower you with knowledge and tips that will help you become better writers. Alongside this workshop, we also invite you to join our free Discord writers community, where you can share content, gain valuable tips, and have a direct line of communication with our editors, who can also help you become better writers. If you don't already have an account on Medium, we also recommend that you set up a free account after this workshop. And if you do, be sure to send us your username as well. I would say the best way to do that is over Discord, and if you look in the description of this video, you'll see links to our Discord community alongside our Twitter, LinkedIn, and a few other bits and pieces as well. So without further ado, let's begin. So the first step to becoming a better writer is to know your story. Now, every piece of writing has a purpose. Writers, after all, write for a reason. They've got something to say and a reason for saying it. Now, the purpose of a story is what motivates writers to write in the first place. So knowing your story is all about incorporating a precise sense of purpose within your piece. Now, structuring your piece around a sense of purpose lends conciseness and focus and makes for an overall better reading experience. However, before we get to know what the purpose of your story is, let's spend a few minutes talking about why you should spend time figuring out the purpose of your story in the first place. After all, if you're simply trying to chase views, you could just write about a trending topic or a popular technology. But here's the thing, unless you're passionate about the story you're telling, unless you are convinced that the story is worth putting genuine care, time, attention, and effort into, your audiences will not be convinced either. And why should your audience care if you don't? So in order to be passionate about your story, you must be genuinely invested in writing about whatever it is that you're writing, and know why you're writing it. Topics in the field of JavaScript and web development are vast. A popular library like React may be a topic in itself, but it's up to you to choose what it is that you want to say about React. So, if you want to write a tutorial, if there's a specific coding example you want to tackle, if you want to write an argumentative piece, or whatever it might be, instead of choosing a particular angle solely with views in mind or writing a generic article, ask yourself, what is it about a particular topic that piques my interest? What is it specifically that I have to say and that I believe deserves to be heard? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to write about something unique that no one has ever thought about or written about before. And you could easily just write like an introductory beginner's guide, something that's easily available on the internet for most topics. But maybe you can write it from your own experience. You might feel that the tutorials or articles that are already available on the internet don't do a good enough job of explaining things. Maybe that's because there are gaps in the knowledge they provide, or maybe there are areas that you think can be improved upon. And that's where you can have your purpose. So let's take an example, and I'll just take a sip of water in the meantime. So we receive a lot of articles that are roadmaps for beginners to get started with web development. But what separates a good roadmap article from the average roadmap article? Now, in the case of the former, the author of this piece was actually invested in what they have to say and knows what they're talking about. So, for example, they not only depart from the usual roadmap article, well, this piece doesn't, but such pieces usually would talk about things like beginning with HTML and then moving on to CSS and JavaScript and then maybe a framework or something like that. But this piece takes extra effort to talk about things like Git and version control. And moreover, not only has the author explained each of the steps and why they're important, but they have provided an exhaustive list of resources. Now, perhaps this was simply a case of the author reading the average roadmap article and saying, hey, I can do better than this. Beginners deserve better. And there you have it. That's their motivation. So from there, they were able to craft a piece that, in spite of treading common ground, was able to uniquely connect with its audience. And I think Kurt Vonnegut said it best when he said, find a subject you care about and which in your heart you feel others should care about. So the point being here that is, don't just write something because you think lots of people might read it, but write something because you have a genuine reason, because you feel invested in writing about it, and it's something that you feel is worth putting the time, attention, care, and effort into. And it's when you can do that that you'll have much more to say, and you'll have something that will resonate with your audience. So much for the question of why you should care about the purpose of your story. Now on to figuring out your story's purpose. And you can do this by asking this simple question: what am I trying to accomplish with this story? The question has everything to do with what my story is meant to do. What goal is it supposed to accomplish? Now, as Medium themselves elaborated in one of their own articles for helping people become better storytellers, when we ask the question of what do I want my story to do, that is not to be understood along the lines of what is my story about, but rather in much more specific terms of the effort it ought to have on the audience reading it. So when someone reads my article, what is it exactly that I want them to take away from it? I mean, look, let's take this workshop as an example. What do we hope to accomplish from it? Well, those of you who are attending and who are watching in retrospect, hopefully will learn how to both improve the quality of your writing, and this is why answering the question of what I want my story to do is important to be. It's important to be as specific and as precise as possible. It's critical that you understand what the story is meant to accomplish, and that you're able to sum it up in a couple of sentences at most. And once you have the answer down, it might be helpful to come up with the clearest and most concrete title imaginable based on your answer. And once you've done that, what you can do is use the title as a lens to flesh out the rest of your piece. For example, based on the title of your piece, what do you think are the crucial points the story should include? What are some things that can be left out to make your piece more precise? This is an approach that really helps trim the fat from your piece and keep your story focused and concise. So if I begin with a how-to structure, clearly my piece is meant to help the audience with a particular problem. In that case, that specific problem and its solution should be the lens through which I should structure my piece. And we can take a look at some examples from a publication that have done exceptionally well. And we'll see that despite the overall topics or the technologies being somewhat familiar, the titles of these articles are framed in a singular and concise manner that incorporates a precise sense of purpose within the piece, and without using any clickbait as well. And these titles encapsulate exactly what the article is meant to communicate. So here we have an example where the title accurately describes what the post is about. Now, React and Vue comparison pieces are common, especially what we would say are fluff pieces, such as React versus Vue in 2022, which is the best framework? Something along those lines. And yes, we know that React is a library, not a framework. But such pieces simply cobble together data from various websites, but they lack purpose. And we often find that people write these kind of articles because they're just simply chasing views, rather than actually providing knowledge and insight and a new perspective to a topic. So what is it about this piece that sets it apart? Well, here everything we have learned so far comes in handy. Now, the title of this piece begins from a fairly modest perspective, and it's not a clickbait title. So it's simply, I created the exact same app in React and Vue, here are the differences. It's simply the author's personal experience creating the same app using both technologies and its findings. And what is it that this piece is meant to do? Well, exactly what the title says. It simply shows the code for building the exact same app and how it differs when using two different technologies, and gives the reader the opportunity to draw their own conclusions. Now, since this is the lens through which the piece is structured, there are no extraneous bits like quoting grand statistics to make a point that's already been made elsewhere. Nor does it claim to have discovered once and for all whether Vue or React is better. It simply shows the code behind both the apps and the differences in their implementation. Now, when we can frame the piece through the lens of the title, which was, here are the differences, the writing remains to the point, cuts down on fluff, and focuses on the key areas. And this allows developers to check out the code, notice the differences, and draw their own conclusions. And they can even point out sections of the code that they may have implemented differently. Now, by implementing a sense of purpose, this piece becomes so much more than just another Vue or React comparison piece. And at present, this article has 989,000 views and over 100,000 claps. So here we have another example of a title that is concise, grabs attention, and is accurate to the story being presented. Here the author is stating an opinion or making an argument, and the title immediately tells you that this piece is going to be an argumentative one, which, for anyone just listening, the title is Tailwind is an anti-pattern. Now, the rest of the piece is framed through this lens with a primary focus on providing code examples and sourced claims to argue the author's point. This is key to writing an argumentative piece, as they can often be based in a controversial opinion. So it's extremely important when making such claims that you're able to back it up with necessary code or data. Now, once again, see how the purpose of the story and what it's meant to do offers us a lens to structure the story with. It immediately tells us what the key focus of the content should be. And through these examples, I hope you now have a good idea of how the requirements for a piece, what its primary areas of focus should be, and how it should be structured, slowly take shape once you know your story and understand its purpose. Okay, so the second step or tip is to know your audience. Now, writing is a medium that connects writers to its readers, and this connection is strong if the writer's voice resonates with the audience. Now, as a writer, you need to have a clear understanding of the readers with whom you're trying to engage. Your connection with readers is going to be strong if you know what your readers are interested in, if you know what it is they're looking for. And you can do this by picturing one person in your mind, outlining their likes, dislikes, needs, wants, and trying to write for that person. So imagine this person is sitting in front of you. Think about what they want to hear from you. After you've pictured this reader in your mind, use them as your fixed point, your reference point to chart your writing around. Readers have specific tastes and preferences. So, for example, a lover of mystery novels will be more drawn to the world of Arthur Conan Doyle than the world of Tolkien. The fan of a modern fantasy is more likely to pick up Jim Butcher or Neil Gaiman in a bookstore than high fantasy authors like Robert Jordan or Robin Hobb. Thus, after picking a topic to write about, it's important to draw a mental image of your reader. And this will give you a clearer idea of what it is that your readers are looking for from you. In terms of technical writing, it's important to understand who you're writing for. So take JavaScript developers, for instance. Now, we all know the field of JavaScript development is vast, and you need to figure out whether you're catering to the demands of a beginner developer, an intermediate one, a senior software engineer, a tech lead, or an experienced CTO. And when you're doing this, you need to imagine what queries might they have regarding a certain topic, and then set out addressing them in your writing. Now, suppose you're writing for a beginner who's just getting started with coding. A topic that might be familiar to you might be alien to them, and it's important to remember that. So you should refrain from using jargon, but instead give explanations and code examples wherever necessary. Now, your writing will benefit beginners if you make it accessible for them. Now, here's an example of a beginner-friendly topic presented in a way that beginners can find accessible. So, the title's Array Destructuring in JavaScript, a comprehensive beginner's guide. Now, starting with the title, the author makes it clear that this is a topic for beginners. The title serves as a disclaimer to that end as well. You know, calling the article a comprehensive beginner's guide not only fixes the topic, but also fixes the target audience as well. So that title serves as a fixed point for the author to refer to, drawing the boundary within which they are going to operate. Now, the author begins with a brief introduction explaining what the topic is, what the subject is and what it does, and quotes sources wherever necessary. Now, for beginners, this is important because they need to first understand what the topic is about and then dive deeper into the subtopics. For a writer, it's very important to guide the beginner across the expanse of their writing, ensuring that they have a smooth ride. Now, the author explains what one can do with the concept they talk about in the article, and they give code examples in proper code blocks explaining each step involved. And this step-by-step breakdown prevents too much info dumping at one step, thereby ensuring that the beginners don't get intimidated by the text. And moreover, they can easily search for and revisit the same subtopic should they need to revise. And beginners looking for code solutions can easily scan the article for subsections relevant to their query. And here, the author shows a clear understanding of their readers' requirements, and they succeed at catering to all possible demands of a beginner who's trying to learn about something such as array destructuring in JavaScript. And in a similar vein, an experienced developer might not be interested to learn about something such as React hooks. They might be interested in your article for a specific task that can be accomplished with a React hook. Hence, they will appreciate your writing more if you focus on solving the problem at hand instead of re-explaining concepts that are well known to them. And by the way, the links to these posts that we're referring to, we'll make them available in the description after the video. Here's an article from our publication that also follows this method that we just outlined as well. So the title outlines the purpose of the article. The title being State Management with React Hooks, No Redux or Context API. Now, JavaScript developers can identify from the title itself that this article is going to be aimed at experienced developers. The author begins with a short explanation of what it is that they're going to accomplish with the article, and they make the reader aware of what's to come in the subsequent lines. Now, since the audience is for an experienced developer, we only get a brief overview of some of the more kind of beginner level topics within React, such as use state or use effect, only to the extent that it's relevant to the rest of the article and no more. Now, considering the fact that the target readers might already be aware of the basics, the author has deemed it important to include a disclaimer at the beginning of the subtopic that it's an optional section that they can kind of skip if they want to. And the author breaks it down into several subparts, dropping images, code blocks, and explanations wherever necessary. And before pulling the curtains on the article, the author also shows a couple of examples and use cases of the concepts they've explained. And they use code sandbox links for the readers to access the code that they've written. So there's a lot of, although we're not presenting the screenshots on the page, the author takes a lot of time to include lots of different ways to express what it is that they're talking about, whether that's images, code blocks, explanations, and so on. And this article is presently sitting on 249,000 views with 10,718 claps, proving that writing for a specific audience lends strength to your writing and is generally well received in the intended circles. Now, on a given day, readers are exposed to a multitude of written content on numerous platforms. People are scouring the internet for something that will answer their queries. And as a writer, if you are to answer the question of your readers, you first need to understand what it is that readers are asking for. Having a specific audience gives you a target or a focal point to aim at. But having too many targets can divert your attention. Instead, if you focus on one specific reader and employ your wits to satisfy them, you will definitely succeed at pleasing them. Hence, do not be afraid to narrow down your target audience to just one person or group, and at the very least, you're pleasing one person instead of pleasing none. Just going to take a sip of water. I hope everyone is doing well. Okay. So the third step is to harness your inner editor. Now, after putting together the first draft, a shift in perspective is required for a writer to iron out any wrinkles in their writing. For this reason, it's important that the writer puts on the mantle of an editor. Now, the task of an editor is similar to that of a personal trainer. Now, that might sound a little bit strange, but let me try to explain. So, an editor does for your writing what a personal trainer does for your fitness and general well-being. A trainer provides constant guidance, creating an exercise routine, checking your form, counting your reps, and so on. And the trainer sets you on a path to a fitter version of yourself. Similarly, an editor elevates your writing by pointing out your mistakes and showing you the right path. The writer's inner editor views the written piece critically, cutting down any unnecessary parts or adding important details wherever necessary. And this is a critical phase in writing, as it determines whether the piece has strayed from its path and consequently puts it back on the track it has. Now, you as a writer might overlook a lot of apparent mistakes. You might make wrong stylistic choices and might spend too much time on one topic, giving too little attention to another or to others. But you as the editor should look to prevent the story from becoming lopsided and remind yourself of the importance of consistency in flow, style, and structure. And proper use of the English language is imperative. By adhering to the rules of grammar and punctuation, it makes it easier for your readers to understand what message you're trying to convey to them. Now, there's an article that we put together as well that acts as an unofficial, in plain English style guide that outlines good habits that you can implement in your writing. And if you're writing content on a technical subject, it's important to get the terminology right. So as a writer, you are the funnel that guides the flow of ideas and information to your readers. Thus, it's always your responsibility to propagate the correct ideas, in this case, the correct terminology. So, besides being mindful of the grammar, punctuation, style and flow of a writer, the editor should take care that the writer doesn't delve into plagiarism. If the stylistic choices lend validity to your writing, then quotes and citations lend credibility to your written piece. For instance, you might have overlooked using quotation marks, or might have forgotten to cite sources when you're quoting someone, or using text from other sources. Now, this might seem trivial, but it isn't. The writing can get flagged for plagiarism and loses its value, and the writer's task is to remind you that proper citation is of utmost importance. So it not only lends strength and credibility to your writing, but it also connects your writing to the wider field of the subject. Now, should your readers want to explore the broader spectrum or go deeper into the topic, having access to your source will let them do that. And your target is to provide satisfying answers to your readers who have come to you with their queries. Your writing coupled with your sources will help in achieving that. And to lend more emphasis to your point, it's important to go the extra mile by incorporating examples and analyses for the quotes you use in your writing. And you should put forward your take on the lines spoken by another. Now, quoting a source is only a part of the equation. Explanations and examples enrich your story by giving it background and a firm pedestal to stand on, and your writers will benefit from this and get a thorough understanding of the topic you're explaining. Now, while quoting sources, you should also be aware if there are multiple authors contributing to your point. You need to give credit to all of them, missing out on none. Zero. To summarize, be mindful of the following points when you're quoting sources or incorporating another author's ideas into your piece. So, don't copy directly without including quotation marks and or citations. Don't just replace the original words with synonyms if you're taking inspiration from the source text. I'm sure we've all been guilty of doing that at some point in time, but just know it's not right. Don't use the same sentence structure as the source. And finally, don't summarize ideas without proper citation. A well-written article might fall by the wayside if it doesn't present the information in an accessible way, or it might end up drawing eye if it lacks proper citation. And this is why it's a good idea to spend some time inspecting your article under the lens of an editor. Okay, and that brings us on to our fourth and final step, which is to detach yourself. So that's detach yourself and assume the perspective of your reader. Now, while writing fiction, it's generally assumed that the first draft you're writing will not be your final one. In fact, it's usually advised that after writing your first draft, you put it away for a while before coming back to it with fresh eyes to edit it once again. And this is actually something that a lot of people tend to overlook when they're writing articles or technical pieces. They write a draft and they just publish it, when really we should write it and then step away from it for a while. So the whole process can be summed up as getting some distance from what you have written. And this is because it's difficult to have an objective assessment of our writing while we're stuck in the mindset of a writer. It's very difficult to edit a story with any measure of objectivity when you're still very much attached to it. And this is why it's important to clear your head and take a fresh look at what it is on the page. And it's important to get that critical distance to be able to see your writing again with fresh eyes. So this allows you to detach yourself and look at what you've written from a calmer and more detached point of view, and thus see how successful you've been at regarding all of the points mentioned. And this time you do it not as a writer, but as a reader. So now that you know how to figure out your audience, you have a pretty good idea of who your reader is. So when seeing your writing again with fresh eyes, what better perspective to assume than the perspective of your hypothetical reader? Your reader is the final link in the chain, the one who the one who the story and its purpose are meant for. And assuming the perspective of the reader lets us gain a more thorough understanding of what we have written and how accurately it serves its purpose, which is what we kind of spoke about in the first point. So assuming the reader's perspective will let you know just how successful your piece has been in that regard. So when you do this, you can start to see some things such as, which are the areas where the piece is straying from its goal? Which are the areas that require less or a little more elaboration? Which pieces require more or less attention? What can you trim out? See how reading the story from the reader's perspective makes you feel. Is it bringing about the desired result? Now, in point 2, we spoke about how knowing your audience. We spoke about knowing your audience as a singular figure. And again, if you assume the perspective of your reader, you will get a good idea of how much your piece is exactly appealing to your audience. So is something lacking in style? Is it too verbose if it's meant for a beginner? Is it too simple if it's meant for an expert? And our third point was to put on your inner editor's glasses. Now, once you're reading your piece from the perspective of a reader, any poor formatting or structuring will stand out. What are the areas where you can make the piece more presentable? Are there any spelling or grammatical errors? Is there a sentence that can be phrased better? If there are multiple points you need to make, do you think breaking them down with subheadings would help? Or perhaps using bullet points, or would that be a distraction? At this point, when you're reading it as the reader, you know what you're looking for, and you can see how this final piece of advice, which is to assume the perspective of your reader, ties together all of the tips we have shared so far. Often during the course of writing an article, we may have to prioritize one point over another, and we may not be able to see if this detracts from the overall piece unless we implement this final step. And it's because this final step offers a holistic perspective on how successfully we have implemented the previous three points without distracting from the overall piece or overall purpose of the piece. And it's a bird's eye view perspective on all the 3 points mentioned so far with respect to your overall piece. And this perspective lets you smoothen out all of the clunkiness that may have been there in the overall flow. and it's that final checkpoint you can take before releasing your writing to the world. But successfully doing this can really help streamline and enhance the quality of your writing, and knowing your audience allows you to know exactly what to write about and how to go about doing it. But you're still operating within the mindset of a writer while doing this. And once you detach yourself and then come back and read your overall piece from the writer's perspective, or the reader's perspective I should say, then you can see how successful you've been in that regard, and what stylistic or structuring changes you may still need to make. And it's all about the benefit provided by getting the necessary distance from your piece, where you're able to assess it objectively. Okay, so to summarize, the 4 steps to improving the quality of your writing are: 1, know your story; 2, know your audience; 3, harness your inner editor; and 4, detach yourself. Now, I hope you have all found this to be useful and have picked up a tip or two, and we'll continue. What we can do is continue this conversation, and our editorial team will be available to answer any questions you may have in our Discord channel. I'm sure you've been chatting with them as well alongside this. I mean, I've not looked at the chat at all, so I have no idea. But what we would suggest is take a look at the description if you haven't already for this video, and you'll see lots of different links that will be useful to you. So you'll have links to our Twitter and LinkedIn, but you can also join our Discord from there as well. There's a link to the In Plain English Style Guide, and we'll also provide links to all of the articles that we spoke about in this workshop. And ideally what you can do is go away and read them and take some inspiration from them and get some advice. And we also hope to see some new article submissions into our publications over the coming days. If you're not yet a writer for In Plain English, then what we can do is get you added as a writer this week. And as mentioned, just join the Discord, give your username in any of the channels, and we can get you added.